Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, Grasses Greener 99. Thanks for the suggestion, Grasses Greener. You asked, why are there no wild cows? We see wild horses, wild boars, wild goats. But cows? Nope. They're either standing politely in a pasture or already pre-packaged as a cheeseburger. So where did all the wild cows go? Stay tuned as we uncover the mystery of the missing moo, right here on Explaining Everything. If cows had an ancient ancestor that strutted around the prehistoric world, it was the Aurochs. Picture a cow, but taller, stronger, and with horns that looked like they could pick up satellite TV. These beasts were the original wild cattle that roamed Europe, Asia, and North Africa. They weren't gentle grazers either. Aurochs were big, muscular, and more likely to flatten you than moo politely. Think less Moo Moo Meadows from Mario Kart and more Boss Battle in Skyrim. Humans, of course, saw these hulking beasts and thought, yes, perfect. Let's get close to the angry horned tank and see if we can keep it in our backyard. And thus began the long, weird journey of cow domestication. The last Auroch actually died in the 1600s in Poland, which means cows' wild cousins are now completely extinct. So if you're wondering why you don't see wild cows anymore, it's because their ancestor tapped out a few centuries ago. Here's where cows take a hard left turn into domestication. Around 10,000 years ago, people in the Fertile Crescent and India started taming aurochs. Instead of just hunting them, we figured out how to turn them into a reliable food machine. Milk, meat, leather, and eventually cheese, aka the holy trinity of pizza. But here's the catch. Once humans started domesticating cattle, we bred them to be calmer, slower, and frankly, dumber. Aggressive aurochs were dangerous, but a cow that just stares into space while chewing grass for 8 hours. Much safer. This is why modern cows are basically the introverts of the animal kingdom. They're gentle, they stick together, and they don't really thrive without us. Put them in the wild, and they're basically walking buffets for wolves, lions, or anyone with a fork and knife. So if you've never seen a cow surviving in the wild, that's because they were literally bred out of their wildness. They've been genetically edited for thousands of years into the animal equivalent of a Netflix binge buddy. Calm, low maintenance, and always lying down when you least expect it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if some cows just escaped into the wild? Wouldn't that bring back wild cows? Great question. Turns out, not exactly. Escaped cattle are called feral cows, and yes, they exist. There are herds in Hawaii, Australia, and even parts of the US. But instead of transforming back into mighty aurochs, they usually become scrappy, confused versions of themselves. Imagine a suburban house cat suddenly living in the jungle. They'll survive, but it won't be pretty. For example, in Hawaii, feral cows roam forests and mountains, but instead of being majestic wild creatures, they're more like drunk tourists knocking over everything in sight. In Australia, they damage ecosystems and get into conflicts with ranchers. They're tough, sure, but still recognizably cows. They didn't magically evolve back into wild beasts with six-packs and lightning horns. So technically, feral cows exist, but they're not wild cows. in the way we think of wild horses or wild boars. They're just escaped livestock doing their best impression of being independent. Let's imagine for a second that we let cows go free. What would happen? First, predators would have a field day. Wolves, lions, bears. They'd all look at a cow and think, "Oh, dinner's delivered early today." Cows aren't fast like antelopes. They don't have sharp defenses like boars, and they definitely don't know stealth. Their only strategy is standing around, hoping no one notices their giant steak-shaped bodies. Second, cows would struggle to survive without humans managing food and shelter. Modern cows are basically pampered. They don't migrate long distances or strategize about predators. Take away the farmer, and most cows wouldn't last long. And third, even if some herds did make it, they'd still be feral, not wild. That's because wild means they exist as a natural species on their own. Cows are too domesticated to ever really go back. The Aurochs is gone, and cows are stuck with us, forever dependent, forever mooing. Humans spent thousands of years domesticating cattle into the chill, grass-chomping animals we know today. And while feral cows exist here and there, they're not truly wild. They're just lost pets on a very large scale. Cows, in other words, are fully domesticated creatures. They traded in their freedom for comfort, safety, and endless human snacks. And honestly, they don't seem to mind. They get fed, they get taken care of, and in return, they give us milkshakes, leather jackets, and way too many fast food options. So the next time you pass by a cow in a field, remember, you're looking at an animal so domesticated that wild cow isn't even a thing anymore. The closest you'll ever get is an auroch skeleton in a museum, or that one angry bull that still thinks it's a boss fight. If you learned something new about our beloved cows, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe give them a bit more love and care. They deserve it. Also, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.